today's webinar is I wanted to finish up this series for the month of April of using FocalPoint to simulate shallow depth of field and also changing the plane of focus of your shot. And in the previous webinars of this series, we would usually hit up other products as well. So we'd go to Photo Tools and Stylize, and then go to FocalPoint and change the depth of field and maybe finish it up in Lightroom. In this first example, we're actually going to go through a few different products. We'll start off with Perfect Layers, our newest member of the Perfect Photo Suite family, which you see a little shortcut right here. We'll then go to Mask Pro. We might go into Photo Tools, and then we'll go into FocalPoint. So we'll hit at least 3 different products, and then just give it a final look. So we're going to start here. Where's my little Finder window? There we go. This image, you may have seen me work on this image on previous Perfect Layers demos. I'm not going to go into Lightroom for this one. All the Perfect Layers demos we've done so far have been in Lightroom, and I actually just want to work outside of Lightroom for this image so that you can get an idea of the other ways that Perfect Layers is accessible. I'll also show you, for those Aperture users like Jacob, I'll show you how to get Perfect Layers configured in Aperture now that I have a copy installed again after I got my new laptop. All right, so we've got these images here. I took these images after Photoshop World Orlando a few weeks ago. Me and 2 of my colleagues went to Universal Studios, and I'm too chicken to go on a roller coaster. I actually am terrified of roller coasters. I'm terrified of most things in life, roller coasters being one of them. But I figured I might as well do some photography while my 2 coworkers went on this ride. And so I took 4 shots to get what we call kind of a motor drive sequence. So you can see image 1, image 2, image 3, and image 4, kind of like a motor drive. So what we're going to do is we're going to use Perfect Layers to combine these images. So what I'll do is I can do one of 2 things. I can right-click and select all of these images and then go to the context menu and open with Perfect Layers. This will work on the Mac or the PC, or on PC, I believe. Or we can just launch Perfect Layers. When Perfect Layers launches for the first time, you're going to see this dialog, these kind of keynote slides. There are 13 slides. I strongly recommend going through each one of them because it has some really good information. I'll bring this up pretty much in every Perfect Layers webinar because that's how important it is to me to get the word out, that don't just bypass this. Go through it. There's some really interesting information about some of the functionality in Perfect Layers. If you don't want to see it anymore, just select this little checkbox here and I'll turn off. All right. I'm not going to spend too much time in Perfect Layers because this is not predominantly a Perfect Layers demo. But here we are in Perfect Layers, and now what I can do is go to File, Open, and then I'll just navigate to that folder with those files. So I'm just going here. Where did I put it? I remember where. Right here. Roller coaster. And here are my 4 images, and I'm going to hit Open. Okay, so here are my 4 layers. Layer 4, Layer 3, Layer 2, and Layer 1. Now when I'm stacking images like this, I typically like to start at the bottom layers and move my way up. I don't want to start at the top because you run the risk of overwriting your mask as you go down. So what I'm focusing on here is I want to get that first car in the same frame with this car. Usually what I'll do is I'll drop the opacity of my image just to make sure that the images are aligned. And you can see that for the most part. Now, I didn't have a tripod, or I had a tripod, but I wasn't shooting with a tripod here. So you can see that these 2 images pretty much align. And I'm using this bar as my keystone to see if it's moving, and it's not moving. So what I'm free to do is I'm going to use a tool here called the Trim tool. And it's this little pair of scissors here. What the Trim tool does is I can use it to make a selection around a part of a layer that I want to keep. So in this situation here, I made a selection around this roller coaster car because that's the only thing in this second layer that I want to keep. I want to reveal everything underneath, and what's underneath is this layer with the first car. So I'm going to hit Enter or Return to reveal that second layer. So now we've got these 2 images here. And now we can just repeat the process really quickly. I'm going to drop the opacity, see if this blends pretty well. But I can see right off the bat, you see this area right here? There's an overlap. I didn't give the cars enough time between exposures, which is not a problem. What I'll do is I'll just bring this up, and again, I'm going to use my trim tool, and this really speeds up masking because I don't have to worry about drawing everywhere. Hit enter, and now what I can do is just use my masking brush. I'll paint out this area here, and I'll just get rid of that last row. So it's revealing the layer underneath, which is fine. It looks fine to me. There's a nice gap over here, and if I want, I can get another. I can even remove one more car. So those people never existed. If it's misaligned, you can just go to your move tool, and I'm using my arrow keys to align the tracks. So there you go. So that's how you can align. And then we'll just repeat the process one more time. Turn this layer on, drop down the opacity of the layer, and probably just move it around with the move tool just to get it aligned correctly. That looks good. Okay, now one more time. Get the trim tool, bring up the opacity, and let's just kind of mask this guy in. After you create your selection, if you need to refine it, you can. You can make it larger, you can move it around. So it's not just a one-stop thing. Hit enter, and there we go. So here is our motor drive sequence. What I can do now is go to File, Save, and that's going to update the PSD file. So I'm going to go here. I'll just type roller coaster motor drive SEQ. Cool. So now Perfect Layers is creating a layered PSD file that we're going to bring into Photoshop, and I'll show you why. While this is going on, I see some questions here. Art's asking Art's asking what essentially, to paraphrase, what will the price of Perfect Layers be if you already own the Perfect Photo Suite? If you own the Perfect Photo Suite 5.5, Perfect Layers will be free for you. You don't have to pay anything. When it comes out in midsummer. Okay, so here is that PSD file that I just told you about. What I can do now is bring this into Photoshop, and I just want to show you something. You see, there are 4 layers. You can see them over here, and you can see the masks that were created with each layer. What I want to do is I want to use Mask Pro to replace the sky because it's somewhat of a solid blue sky. So I've got a sky image that I took, just a standard image I took one day when I was walking around Boston. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'll start by rotating it. So I'll just go to Image, Image Rotation. We can just rotate it 90 degrees. Doesn't really matter. Before I bring it over to this image, what I'll do is I'm going to stamp these 4 layers into a new layer. To do that, I'm going to go to the Layer menu item in Photoshop. I'm going to go to Merge Visible, and I'm going to press and hold the Option key on a Mac or the Alt key on a PC. And what that does is it merges. We can rename this to Merged Layer. So now, if anything, I don't need to worry about ruining these layers. I've got this layer over here to work with. Now what I can do is I can select this sky, bring it over to this image here, and just position it. Oh, why didn't it go? Oh, I know why. Give me a second. Go back here to my history, layer properties. I'm just going to copy and paste it. There we go. Okay. Now I'm going to put the sky underneath this layer. I'm going to drop the opacity of this layer here so we can see where the sky is appearing. So the sky is going to take pretty much the entire area. And now by creating a layer mask and then going to Mask Pro, I can actually use Mask Pro to remove the sky while retaining some of those complex edges. I don't have to worry about masking anything out. So what I did in Mask Pro is I went to Window and Zoom Window, and what that does is it kind of blocks out the background. It makes it a little easier to work on your image without distractions. The way Mask Pro works is you select colors to protect and colors to get rid of. And in this case here, this is pretty easy. It's not that bad in terms of there's a nice discrepancy between keep and drop colors. It's just Mask Pro comes in here really handy because there are a lot of small shapes and it would be kind of hard to mask around them. And I'm just noticing here that I should have fixed this area here, which I can do after the fact. There's a slight misalignment, but we'll ignore that for now. So I'm just going to select some various colors to protect. And I'm using this protect dropper or the keep dropper. And then I'm going to select colors to remove, which are these various shades of blue. And now I'm going to use the magic brush. I'm going to just start brushing through. And you can see how it's going right through, keeping all the details that I need and removing the details I don't want. So like I can get through the track here. Not worried about any of that. And so I'm just going to increase my brush size and try to go fast. And I'm not being, let me actually refine my selection here. I want to make sure I get these colors down here. I'm just going to go really, really fast. Got that. Let me get a few of these colors and let's just see what we got here. I'm just going to focus on getting around here. And that's the nice thing is that normally to mask through the hollow points of these tracks, it would be pretty much impossible, or it would just take a long time because you'd have to make selections through each one. And I regret, I definitely should have been more careful in terms of my alignment between image 2 and 3, because I can see some of the, and between 3 and 4, I can see some of that track misalignment. But, you know, you get the idea, I think, in terms of how we were able to use perfect layers in that situation. What I was using perfect layers just to stage the shot. I was using it basically to get the shot to a starting point where I didn't have before. So originally I had 4 images, and I didn't want 4 images. I wanted 1 image. And I didn't like that blue sky. The blue sky to me was a bit boring. So by putting this little cloudier sky, you know, makes it a little bit more interesting. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to finish this up really quickly by outlining this outer mask. By doing that, I'm creating a barrier of 0 pixels, which I can now fill, and there we go. So now we have our mask. Should be able to go to File, Save, Apply, and now we have our complex mask. So really, I can hide this layer here. We could rename, excuse me, to sky. And if I have a different sky that I want, or if I want to adjust the sky, like I can go to the adjustments palette here and brighten the sky up, you know, add some more shadow or adjust the black point and the midtone area. So if I want the sky to be darker, I could, because I'm on the active layer. I can also adjust the saturation of it. If I want the blues to be a little less saturated, I can just adjust those. Or if I want them really saturated, I can boost them up. So that's kind of how you're working in selections here with Mask Pro and Photoshop. All right, so now we've got a cooler looking shot here. I'm going to go ahead and stamp this again. So I'm going to go to the layer, hold the Option or Alt key on Merge Visible, and now we have our new layer here. What I'm going to do now is go to FocalPoint, and I'm going to change my depth of field because right now the whole image is in focus, and I really only want this front one here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset this. Here's our focus bug. Everything inside the bug is in focus, so I can kind of put it wherever I want and keep focus. And I really just want this front car to be in focus. You can adjust the size and the shape and the orientation of your focus bug by tugging at the legs. But I don't want this round shape. A round shape typically is used if you want to mimic a selective focus or a lens baby look. But in this case here, I'm going to mimic a planar shape. So all I did here, just to slow down because I felt like I went way too fast there, I changed the shape of the bug from round to planar. And you can see the bug. Let's go back to round for a second. I want to bring out a point. You see how the body of the bug here is circular? So that designates the shape. And if we go to planar, it turns to a square. So this is now, instead of a round spot, it's now a plane of focus. So you see how the plane goes through the entire image. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to adjust the directionality of the plane. And I'm going to start adjusting things like I want to drop the amount of blur. I don't need that much blur. So I'm going to drop the amount, and that brings back some of that focus. And I'm also going to adjust the feathering. I'm going to bring the feathering up to have more of a transition between in focus and out of focus. The easiest way to explain feathering is to show it to you visually. So if I hit this under the focus brush palette, if I hit show mask, feathering is the transition from what's in focus, or designated by solid black, and what's out of focus, designated by white and gray. This is the feather. Now watch what happens if I bring the feather to 0. 0 transition. If we hide the mask, you'll see a hard line, and we don't want that. I've yet to find a reason, really, unless you have a very distinct horizon, to use a 0 feather. So we're going to bring this back up, and as you bring it up, there's an extremely fine line of out of focus here, or of in focus. Everything is transitioning to out of focus. All right, so let's bring this up a little bit more. Now, I want to bring these guys back here into focus. So I can do that by using this focus brush. So with the focus brush, I usually bring my opacity pretty far down. If your opacity of your focus brush is at 100%, it's going to paint in 100% focus. And if you paint out a little bit, it's not going to look very natural. So I like to have, the lower your opacity, the more forgiveness you have. But each time you draw, you have to compound it. So I'm drawing several times on this area, and each time I'm analyzing how much of the area is in focus, and I stop when I'm happy. And I'll do the same thing over here. Now this area was already in motion, so I'm not too worried about it. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to change the mode of my focus brush from paint focus to paint blur, and I'm going to bring my opacity way, way down, because I want to bring this bar out of focus just slightly, because it's distracting me. So right now my plane of focus, if you see here, is really just this area here and that little part of the car. Add a little bit of blur here. Just kind of small little strokes of blur that I'm painting in. Now what we can do is we can adjust the brightness and the contrast of the out of focus area. So you can see if I drop the brightness, it gets dark, and if I bring it up, it gets bright. And I actually kind of like it a little bit bright in this scene. I'm also going to boost the contrast of that out of focus area. And the last thing I'm going to do, because this area is kind of in the middle of the scene, I'm going to apply a little bit of a vignette. So I'm going to bring it down a bit and bring in my midpoint. So now this is actually looking pretty cool. Like here's the original before we did anything in FocalPoint. And this is we're adding some nice kind of drama to the scene. Now that I think about it, though, I'm going to go back to my focus brush, make sure I'm set to paint blur, and I want to blur this track out. A little bit up here, too. Okay. So that adds a little bit of dimension. Let me paint some focus here. I think I painted a little bit of blur into the tops of these people's heads. I don't think they'll appreciate it too much. All right, that's better. Okay, so now we can hit apply. And then here is, if you see, if we start at the beginning, this is our very original image. Second layer, third layer, fourth layer, all done in perfect layers. We then added some adjustment layers to a sky, to which we masked through that image, stamped it, and then used FocalPoint to create a selective plane of focus. Now there's some other things we could do here. This could work. I was working on this earlier in the webinar earlier today. We could use a lasso tool in Photoshop. I don't know how well it'll work. Maybe it'll be kind of cool. What I'm doing is I'm kind of drawing a selection around the front of this car. And my selection, I'm not exactly sure what it's going to do, but I made a selection around the front here. I'm going to go to Filter. I'm going to go to Blur, Radial Blur, and then we're going to make sure that the blur method is zoom, not spin. Spin actually will turn it into a circular motion. Zoom will actually add the blur in a direction that you want. So think about it. If this is your midpoint, So this is, pretend this is the car. This is the selection. It's the front of the car. What motion is the car going? It's going this way. So you put the car up here, and the motion is going to the bottom left, which is kind of the motion of the car. Let me move this out of the way. The car is going this way. So we're going to mimic the direction of the blur this way. I'm going to make my quality best, and I'm going to bring the blur amount down a little bit just to see. Okay, so we need a little bit more because all it did was distorted, which is fine. This is an experiment. Let's go to the history. Let's go back to the our state of focal point, and let's redo that selection so that we get kind of a little bit more of the car. Something like that. And we'll go to the filter section, blur, radial blur. Let's bring the amount up even more. Hit OK. So this is kind of where we're getting at, is we're adding some motion. This is a bit too much, and that's fine. It's all about experimentation. But it also shows that I have too much of the selection around the car. So what I would do here is I would just kind of experiment. This is what I do a lot, actually, is I'll kind of experiment with this. Here's another thing we could have done. Let's go back to focal point, and let's go to the sky. So I'm going to deselect all these layers here. I'm going to go to the sky here, and I'm going to make the clouds move a little bit with the same exact function. I'm going to go to File, Blur, Radial Blur. We're going to drop the amount down, and then I want the clouds going from left to right. So I'm going to put the direction of the blur this way. So the center area is to the left, and the directionality is moving to the right. And what I want it to do is apply some sort of motion to these clouds. And this is totally optional. But I want to see the effect. Okay, so that's giving a little bit of cool motion to the clouds. Turn these on, and turn on the mask, and you can see now how we're adding even more dynamic look. And let's get rid of these two layers here, because you can see if we turn on this layer, it has a snapshot of the original sky. So let's delete these two layers, and we'll create a new snapshot. And then the nice thing about focal point is that it has sticky settings, so everything is going to be retained from the last time we used it. So all I need to do is go to Apply, and now we've got that cool motion, but we've got the so this is looking like a really cool shot. This looks like a product shot or an advertising shot that you can use. Bill, I just saw Bill brought up a good question. He says when he uses focal point to brush, focus, or blur in or out, the cursor jumps all over the place. Okay, several reasons for that. If you're working on a very high resolution image and you have, here, I'll go into, just to show you, let's delete this focal point layer and we'll go back into focal point. This happens to me too every now and then. Usually it'll happen like this. If I have a big, huge brush and I have my opacity up way high and I start brushing, my cursor will drag a lot of times. But this image actually is, when I work on images on my webinars, I compress the images down to lower resolution JPEGs, so it's not as bad. But trust me, when I'm working on images like that, Bill, the same thing happens. It's just because it's processing. If you want, one of the tips I have, let's say you want to paint focus in on this car. What I usually do is I'll make my brush really small, and again, I'll bring my opacity of my focus brush in, and I'll usually outline what I want to paint. So all I'm doing is I'm drawing an outline of this car. Then I can go to the Show Mask. Painting focus and blur in this view is significantly faster than in this view. So now, let's say I want to bring this in focus, I could bring my opacity up and just paint in and just get to the edges here. And you can see how it's much, much faster. And then when you hide the mask, it comes back in. And that actually works kind of nicely because now you're getting more of a transition from in focus to out of focus. But I might paint some of that, just a tiny bit of blur right here. So that's kind of, I hope that helps, Bill. Dennis is asking, why do I use a radial blur instead of a motion blur? I like the characteristics of the motion blur, or I like the characteristics of the radial blur to convey motion than the motion blur. Um, I've always found the results to be far superior. You can go here. Oh, I forgot. Let me just go to filter or make a selection over here. Filter, blur, motion blur. To me, this just kind of, I like the way it throws the pixels in the radial blur than the motion blur. Here we kind of change the angle to match the angle of the motion, and you can throw kind of this. Typically, I find I'll use this more on like a runner or something. But clouds, I like the way it throws clouds better. But it's totally subjective. Like this screams out too much for me. Um, so let me undo that. Okay. So that's kind of an example I wanted to show you of how you can use, all the webinars we've done so far on perfect layers have been just on perfect layers, and it's important for you guys to understand that the product works very well in tandem with our other products and with Photoshop. The perfect layers is not meant to be a replacement to Photoshop if you already have it. It's more to be an opportunity to get a layered workflow solution in Lightroom or Aperture, and a very quick one at that. All right, so I'm going to quit out of here. Let me see if there are any questions. Yeah, Bill. So Bill says he's working on a large TIFF file. Exactly, Bill. I've got a Mac Pro, 8 cores and 16 gigs of RAM, and it happens to me too. Granted, I'm powering two 30-inch displays. That doesn't help either, but the point is it works. Okay. I'm just looking at the questions here. Yeah, Perla, the show mask when you're painting in focus, it's the easiest way to kind of get it. But again, make your outline so you know where you're painting. Okay. Let me silence my phone. My phone is ringing. Okay. Let's go to another image, and this one will focus on. Let's see, which image should we work on, guys? This one? Nah. Well, let's do this one. This one's fun. All right, bring this into Photoshop. And I will show you guys the Aperture users. I don't know if Jacob's the only one who uses Aperture on the line. Are there other Aperture users here? Throw it up in the, yeah, Jacob. Jacob, you seem to be the only one who's an Aperture user. Oh, no, Paula. You've got a friend of, oh no, wow, we got Mia, Marcia. Okay. You guys want, I assume you guys want to see how to use perfect layers. Oh, Francesco too. Brad, way too many Aperture users. I don't know. I don't know. Why would you use Aperture when Lightroom is clearly better? The opinions stated are not that of onOne Software, but of Brian Matiash. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I want to show you a concept, and I try to bring this up on every Perfect Layers webinar. Why did I say perfect layers? You see Freudian slip on every FocalPoint webinar, and that's the use of selections to protect your a certain item on your scene. So in this scene here, you may think, well, there's not much of a plane of focus, and you're right. The plane of focus actually for this image is, if I make a narrow enough brush, is this. This is my plane of focus. You can see my over-caffeinated drawing skills. There we go. That's my plane of focus. And the key to planes of focus, guys, is that whatever's on the plane of focus on a vertical plane, on the Y plane, should also be in focus. It's the transition and the width that can go out of focus. So everything here, meaning this entire area here, has to be in focus. The reason why I want to use FocalPoint is, if I just get rid of these drawing marks, I really want to minimize the look of these power lines. This is a crime to me. This is Martha's Vineyard. This is I went here a couple weeks ago. This is at the very end of Martha's Vineyard. This is Gay Head Lighthouse, and I cannot recommend enough if you want to have the entire island to yourself, go in March or February when it's off season, because we had the entire place to ourselves, bar none. And it was awesome. Like normally this place here gets packed. This is right around golden hour, towards the end of the day. And this image, I don't think was even edited at all. This is, I think, just a single, yeah, this is a long exposure image. Nothing really to it. Now watch what happens if we go into focal point without doing anything. Let's just go into focal point here. All right, so we got our focus brush, or focus bug rather. I'm going to undo. So if you go to the edit menu and you go to reset all, I do this every time because I like to start over. It brings everything back to factory settings. It also brings the shape of the bug back to round. So what I can do here is I can change my shape from round to planar, and I can adjust the orientation and put it on my plane of focus, which I said was over here. Now I can adjust my feathering. I can bring it down a little bit. And you can see now we've got the plane of focus here good to go. I'm going to bring it down a little bit because I want to minimize the look of this pole. But watch now what we have to do. Now we have to go here, go to our focus brush, bring it up and outline this. And it takes a long time. And also it could be very sloppy because, if you brush here, you might end up getting some of this land in focus behind and it just looks bad. So let's cancel it out of here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a selection around my lighthouse. In Photoshop, the easy way to do that is to use this quick selection tool. And the quick selection tool will automatically detect, for the most part, major contrasts in edges. So you can see it detects that, okay, there's a contrast in edges over here, so I'm going to make my selection around it. Now, because the sky is predominantly blue, I'm not worried about the shift in color. I'm also just going to contract my selection over here so that I just get this, the lighthouse. Now, the way focal point works in Photoshop is if you make a selection, focal point will work on whatever's in your selection. So watch what happens if with this, oops, I don't actually want that in there. Watch what happens if I send this image with the lighthouse selected to focal point. It only works on the selection. It's only blurring the selection, and we don't want that. The key here is this. You make your selection, and you know what? I don't even care. Let me, I'm just going to save this as an alpha channel. I'm going to explain what I'm doing, but just for a second here. I'm going to get rid of this antenna. It's bothering me. That's great. Way to go. Just kind of mask that out there. Normally, I actually probably would mask out that antenna to begin with, so I don't feel too badly. Okay, so I'm going to load this selection again. Okay. Oops. All right. If we send this image into focal point as it is, focal point will only work on the lighthouse because it's selected. So the key here is to go to your select and then inverse. So it selects everything but the lighthouse, and that's designated by the marching ants going around the outside of the image. So everything up until these marching ants is selected. Now what I can do is I can go to focal point, and of course I need to select an RGB channel, which is over there. Now what I can do is rest certain that no matter where my bug is, I can blast up my feathering, or not my feathering, rather, my the amount of my blur, if I want, and know that my lighthouse will be protected. Now, what this means is I can make a really nice shallow plane of focus here. Let me bring up my feathering. And you can see if we show the mask, where's my amount? There it is. Okay, and let me hide my mask. So what I can do now is I can select my focus brush, drop the opacity, draw my plane of focus, kind of like a strip over here, and the strip over here. And I'm just kind of following this little kind of strip of grass. And now I can go to my show mask, go to the focus brush, bring it up to 100%, and just paint in, because I want the entire foreground to be in focus. And I want it to be in focus through the lighthouse, so I'm not really worried about that. So I'm just kind of painting over here. This is going to be sloppy, but it should be a good, good enough job to illustrate to you what we're trying to do. Okay. Now if we hide our mask, now the reason why this looks so bad, this is kind of a good example of why you should never paint at 100% opacity, is because if we zoom in over here, you can see this hard transition, which we don't want. The reason why I wanted to paint at 100% was to show you the plane of focus. Now what we can do is we can drop the brightness of the background and boost the contrast. One thing you're going to want to make sure of is, if you really are going to drop the brightness a lot, is that you have your selection not include this part of the sky. Now it's up to you whether that's worth it, because you'd have to actually use the adjustment brush and select outside those areas. To me, it's not worth it, so I usually wouldn't touch it in this situation here. I might boost the contrast a bit. I have a little area here that doesn't match, so I might mask that out in Photoshop, but for the most part, everything's pretty good. Obviously, I definitely wouldn't leave this as is. I would have painted in at a more gradual pace, but I just wanted you to see what happens when you use a selection to protect a certain part of your image. Because now FocalPoint's only working on the background, which is what we want. Right now, you can't even really tell that there's something over there. It doesn't register that much because. So here we can go to hit apply, and then we can go into photo tools. If we deselect this and just let me toggle this palette, just apply one or two effects. Like we can apply golden hour enhancer to bring out, because it was actually golden hour, and maybe just enough darkness. There you go. Bada bing, bada boom. It went. Let's hit apply, let it go, and we can take our little walk through the layers. So this was our original image. Oops, wrong key. Then we used FocalPoint, and then we used photo tools to create a shallow depth of field, but retain perfect focus on our lighthouse. Let me see if there are any questions. Why not get rid of the pole too? In this case here, Jerry, you probably could. Let me see how well the spot healing brush works. You got to be careful to that part there. That's not too bad. And then at this point, I might just try a flat clone. It might work, it might not. Kind of make a big fat brush like this, set my target to there, and match up the horizon. This is better with a mouse than a stylus, in my opinion. And then just kind of quickly, not quickly, slowly go through. So there, that's kind of that. And actually this, you can see there's a little bit of you'd have to fix that up. Now, don't worry, I'm looking at my recorder screen and I can see that there's this kind of banding over here. That's because of the compression over the internet. It's making it look like it's banding, but on my screen it looks perfectly fine. Can you demonstrate how the tilt shift effect would work on the lighthouse? I have another image that works better. Mary, I'll show you another image where I can apply a tilt shift look. Bob, when using the quick selection tool for your mask, how do you address an edge that might be too hard? Like when you select people. Well, if we make our selection again here with the quick select, So I'm just going very quickly just for the sake of illustration. If you have a hard enough edge and you want to kind of compensate, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go to select, modify, and then I'll either expand or contract. For people or for hard edges, that usually means I'm expanding. Then you can select how many pixels to push it out, and it'll push it out equally. So here I'll do, let's just do 30 pixels so you can see. So it pushes it out 30 pixels, and it's almost kind of like a feather with your selection, if anything. And then if it's too much, you can go back to select and go to modify and contract, and we'll cut it in half by 15 pixels. So that's kind of how you would address it with people. Can you use FocalPoint as a smart filter? Yes, Francesco. You could. Is it Francesco or Francesco? I apologize if I'm saying the wrong one. But yes, FocalPoint's the only product that supports smart filters. So you can go of our products, I should say. Is there a FAQ or user manual with the products? Absolutely. So if we go back in the FocalPoint here and you go to in the product, go to help and FocalPoint help, and there's our user guide. So, and we have our keyboard shortcuts in the user guides. Okay. The tilt shift look. Let's work on this other image, and I've worked on this image before, but I like the I guess the lesson that you have. Is this it? Yeah, this is it. Okay. All right. So I took this image. This is a fully processed HDR image, tone mapped and FocalPoint. No, I'm sorry, and Photo Tools. I want to use FocalPoint to change the depth of field. Again, similar to the lighthouse scene, in this shot here, my depth of field will be basically kind of like this. That is so not straight, but whatever. Let's just go this way, kind of like that. Ignore. I can't spell ignore right. There we go, ignore. Or we can just go to the eraser and erase pixels. So how many of you, quick poll, use the eraser tool? I'm really interested in this because I really recommend you never, ever, ever touch the eraser tool. You see what the eraser tool is doing is it's actually deleting pixels, and we never, ever want to do that. So in situations like when you have to remove something, either use your history palette to go back or mask it back in if you're using a layer mask, but never, ever, ever touch the eraser tool, ever. There's no I've never seen a reason for it. Okay, sorry to be alarmist. All right, what we're going to do here is we're going to do the same thing. We're going to use our quick selection brush. We're going to select this jersey barrier, just kind of get all of it, and then we're going to remove. So here, if I make the brush large, it's kind of hard to see because it's so small. You see that little plus sign in the middle of the circle? That means that anything with the plus sign activated, which is the default, it'll add to your selection. If I hit the Option key on a Mac or the Alt key on a PC, it turns to a minus sign. That will remove. Oops, sorry. So what I'm going to do is I want to remove the inside part of here. So I'm just kind of hitting the Alt key or the Option key. I want to remove this inside area. And I want to remove this circle here. And just kind of refine, like I want to add that, and so all I'm doing is I'm refining the selection. All right, so this is looking good. I'm going to teach you something right now called using alpha channels for your selections. So let's say right now this selection is made around the sign here. Now this is good if you want to do some specific adjustments to the sign itself. Like you can go now to your adjustments palette, go to the levels, say, and really darken it up if you want. Because the selection is only around the sign, you can do that. But remember, see right over here, your selection is very unforgiving, so just be careful with that. But that's not my point. My point is with the selection made, you can save the state of this selection by going to your channels palette in Photoshop. If you don't know how to get to your channels palette, go to Window, select Channels. Now, you see this little icon on the bottom here. It looks like a layer mask icon. If you click it, it saves an alpha channel. Now that means nothing right now, but watch what happens. If we deselect, so if I go to select and then deselect, it's like, oh man, I just spent 45 minutes making that perfect selection. Well, if you save the alpha channel, go to your channels palette, go to your alpha channel, and put your cursor inside the thumbnail of the alpha channel. Has to be inside. Press the Command or Control key, Command on the Mac, Control key on a PC, and click. And that restores your selection. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll actually create an alpha channel, and I'll call this one Inner Selection. Let me turn my other layers back on, turn the alpha channel off, and then what I'll, oops, that's not what I want. And then I'll go to Select Inverse, save another alpha channel, and I'll call this one Inverted Selection. So at any given point now, I can go and work on either parts of the image, my key part or the rest of it. Now in FocalPoint, we want to work on the background of the image and not the actual sign. So what we can do now is go to FocalPoint, because everything but the sign is selected. Oh, this is kind of important. So you see, if I go to FocalPoint, if you're going to work with channels, let me bring this up to you now. You might get this error that says, please make sure the RGB channels are selected. That just means that you have to go to your channels. You see how right now the selection is my inverted selection, even though it's hidden? You want to make sure you're on this RGB one. The RGB one will automatically select the red, green, and blue channels below it. And that's what FocalPoint will work on. So that's kind of a point that I want to make. So again, let's go here, let's reset our settings. And you can see, because we made the selection around the sign is always preserved. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the shape from round to planar, and I'm going to change the orientation again so that it matches up with the horizon. And I'm going to put it on my plane of focus, which is down here. Now, the question was, can we simulate a shifted perspective? Or rather, I shouldn't say shifted, a tilted perspective. And we can. To do that, you have to put the cursor inside the body of the bug. So the body of the bug is the square. And on a Mac, you'll hit the Option key, or on a PC, the Alt key. And watch, you see the little units? I don't know if you could see it, but the units are showing the pixel size of the mask. When I hit the Option or Alt key, it turns to a blur unit. And now what I can do is drag upward. And you see how the perspective is tilting? And so I'm basically tilting it to match the parallel of the surface. And the thing with tilting, guys, is really tilting is most effective when you shoot above your subject. If you have a tilt shift lens and you shoot head on and you tilt your lens, you're not going to get that miniature look. You're going to change your plane of focus, but to get that toy model look, you want to be above something. Still, what this does is it does change the characteristics and the directionality of the blur. So now what I can do is I can drop the amount of blur because it's way too much. I don't want that much blur. I can boost the highlight bloom. You see these little white or brighter dots up here? Those are specular highlights. So if I boost the highlight bloom, it'll bring them out a little bit. So it'll add a little bit more drama to the scene. Now I can drop the brightness and boost the contrast a bit so that the sign itself pops out of the scene. You can also see, I don't know if you guys can notice, but our selection was still kind of rough. So we can do one of two things. We can either ignore it, or we can use our focus brush, set it to paint blur, and drop the amount down way low, and just kind of paint in. And this will take some time, but you can get it to match. To me, I don't care at this point because I'm not going to ever use this shot again. But I can hit apply. And we'll have our layer. So this is how we were able to use FocalPoint, not to really drastically change the image, but to give it a little bit more focus on the Jersey barrier. And now we can do whatever we want. I mean, we can continue working on this, but that's basically it. So tilting is good for landscapes. It can be. Tilting is typically when you want to change your plane of focus. So if you go back here, my plane of focus, I think I assume I shot this at like probably f8. This was a 17 millimeter lens. So the wider the lens, the faster you build your depth of field. So right now, my depth of field in this shot, if I select my brush and go to the layer here, my depth of field starts around over here, and it goes way out to the background because you can see everything's pretty much in focus. What I wanted to do was decrease it so that the depth of field really is, where is it? Remember, I'll just hit B. My depth of field shrinks from here to about here. And we can see that because everything behind it gets out of focus. So this is simulating a wider aperture lens. So in landscapes, this would be helpful if there's a particular plane of focus, if there's a strip of your image where you want to maintain focus and blur everything else out. That's where you would use tilting. The other reason of using tilting is the complete opposite. If you tilt, and this is kind of, I don't want to get too heady, but if you tilt and then back focus, you can actually extend your plane of focus so you can go way out and have sharp images. You can focus further than the normal capacity of your lens by tilting against your plane of focus to increase it. For me, though, I'm tilting for effect. I'm tilting to make a shallow depth of field, and that's where FocalPoint would come in. For landscape, it almost is the opposite. I would almost want everything in focus. So in that case, I would tilt in the opposite way that I normally would to make a shallow depth of field and back focus. Cool. All right. Bob, I don't know if I told you, I remember telling someone this last week about using Mask Pro to create complex work paths. I would recommend, again, going to Jim DeVitale's webinar he did with us about 3 months ago, because he did do complex work paths. But I want to build a more advanced Mask Pro webinar in May, so I can probably fit that in. All right, before we go, I want to show you how you can get perfect layers in Aperture. So we're going to launch Aperture. Again, I don't know why you ever would want to do that, but that's just me. All right, I'm going to delete these images here. All right, the first thing in Aperture you're going to want to do is go to Aperture and then go to Preferences. And then go to the Export tab. And then under the External Photo Editor, you'll hit Choose. I already have it as Perfect Layers, but you just hit Choose and you navigate to Perfect Layers. And then select the Perfect Layers alias icon. You can then select if you want to work in a 8-bit or 16-bit PSD file or TIFF file. I just did 8-bit PSD for now. And then you can also select, I profile my displays, so I just use the corresponding display profile. Now, what I can do here is this. In this situation here, I'm going to take this image and I'm going to duplicate it by going to Photo, Duplicate Version. And then I'm going to go to the Adjustments tab and desaturate it and boost the contrast. So now I've got two versions here. If I select both of these versions and go to Photos and then Edit with Perfect Layers, which is now an external editor, we can go to Perfect Layers. We have our two layers as we would have expected. I'm going to use a blending mode so I can hover over these and find one that I like. So I like hard light. Well, hard light or overlay. Overlay or hard light? I like overlay. Okay. And then I can also use a masking brush with a low opacity to restore some of the original skin tone. And then go to File, Save. Now if we go into currently what will happen is um, Aperture will create, because it's an external editor, it'll create a copy of each of the images. So here is the modified version that we saved. This is the PSD file. This is the duplicate, and this is the duplicate, so we can select both of these and delete them. So here's our original image. Here's our image with perfect layers. I don't really hate Aperture at all. In fact, it's actually not that bad. I'm just so ingrained with Lightroom. And truthfully, though, I think all the support is with Lightroom at this point in terms of just overall development. Um, how do I feel about Capture NX? I've never used it. I mean, I'm a Canon user, and I know that doesn't really matter, but um, you can use perfect layers with any product that allows you to set an external editor, or you can always just export the images um, and send them into perfect layers directly. Are the blending layers the same functions as Photoshop? Yes, in a way, except the difference is you saw how in perfect layers, as I hovered over each blending mode, it showed you the preview. Photoshop doesn't do that. Why have perfect layers if I have Photoshop? Man, oh man, the amount of times I've been asked that question over the past week. It's for you to decide. I can't tell you that you need to use perfect layers instead of Photoshop. It's a layered workflow solution for Lightroom and Aperture users. That's the way it is. That's why we actually have the public preview release for free on our website. You can download it and use it and determine if it's something that can work in your current digital photography workflow. Is the current preview beta only usable in Lightroom? No, the current build is functional as itself. So if I just double click on the icon, I can work in perfect layers. And then I just showed you how you can get it working in Aperture. So it works. The key is that there is still functionality that we have not built in that will be built in the final version that comes out midsummer. So there's more coming to this. What you see is just a small percentage of what we're getting. Go to our website and you'll see a list of what we're building in. So yeah, and William's saying, but you still have to leave Lightroom to get to perfect layers, just like you have to leave it to go to Photoshop. Absolutely. It's a plugin for Lightroom. Right now, the only way that you don't have to leave Lightroom is if Adobe builds the functionality into Lightroom. No one has the ability not to leave Lightroom. So at some point, you have to leave it. The key is how well integrated is the interface to Lightroom. So right now, it's very easy in either Lightroom or Aperture to select multiple images, get them into perfect layers extremely quickly, do your work, and then automatically have the result waiting here on a separate non-destructive file. And again, if you need to do finer stuff in Photoshop, you can send that PSD file that Perfect Layers generates to Photoshop.